Anytime I come to this conference, I end up learning far more than I'm here to teach.
There's so much quality.
Parental alienation is a particularly dangerous and insidious form of family violence. I actually call it politically motivated intimate terror.
When a judge sees a video of the child calling the mother horrible names, yelling and screaming at the mother, throwing things at the mother, the mocking, the disrespect, the defiance. And these kids are perfect little model citizens in the other parts of their lives. It's pathological.
I found out the damage of parental alienation on adult persons that suffer from it as children.
We have the evidence now to show that there's at least a relationship there between alienating behaviours and poor mental health.
You realize that this child needs help. I can't just afford not to do anything because the child's getting straight A's in school because this is sociopathic behavior.
Their life satisfaction is very, very bad compared to them. And also the mental health and even the physical health.
It's about isolation and extreme information control. Just look at any typical dictator and you'll have the same attitude there.
The alienating parent, most of the time, does it unconsciously, just because he suffers.
Alienating parents are more likely to be abusive in other ways. It's not only a form of emotional child abuse, but parental alienation is also linked with other forms of abuse.
I know you were made that way, you're not born that way, and there must be a way of helping you not hurt yourself or other people. The cold part is, I know how dangerous you are. I know that you won't stop unless you're stopped. And I know that you'll do whatever it takes. The ends justify the means.
We know that both parents are necessary to raise a child in good condition.
Those are scars that won't heal. They're lifelong, and that's very important to understand.
The police want to reopen cases of suicide where mothers have died from suicide who were victims of family violence. They want to reclassify those deaths as family violence deaths rather than suicide.
The pain and the humiliation of being rejected by your own flesh and blood, I mean, it's painful to go through.
So the suffering is enormous.
If that's the case, if you've got a suicide due to parental alienation, you should reclassify those as family violence deaths as well.
And I knew they were good fathers because I knew them. And it shocked me the way they were treated and their despair.
I haven't found any credible expert who can say it just doesn't exist. And I've cross-examined many experts all around the country.
There are groups of people who I think are politically motivated.
Extreme feminists saying women are always victims of men.
They don't see that parental alienation is real and is an abuse of psychological abuse of children.
Their ideology requires them to dispose of any science with which they don't agree.
So obvious, parental alienation, whatever name you use it. So what is the point in disinformation?
They're okay if women and children suffer for the sake of their ideology. This is straight out of Stalin.
The moment anyone uses this term in the court, particularly men, women somehow end up losing custody. That doesn't happen. And that theory has been contradicted and debunked many times.
A lot of the arguments against parental alienation are rather flimsy. They reflect a lack of understanding of what is parental alienation.
Those 1970s extreme views are alive and well. And parental alienation is a means of achieving their aims.
They're claiming that, whenever a child refuses contact, they're claiming it's alienation. That's just simply not the case, clearly, that children can refuse contact with a parent for valid reasons and then invalid reasons. That it's a very strict definition.
The parental alienation movement, the what I call the college of knowledge around that, is focused on what the science and the evidence tells us about it.
I have been into very many different scientific fields since the early 70s.
We're constantly responding to critics by improving the science.
I have never seen any context that has been where there has been such a strong force against the knowledge about something as I see in this.
This is a new field of practice for therapists. There are a lot of people who lack professional credentials who may enter kind of a new field of practice and claim that they're parental alienation therapists, specialists in the area. There are very few training programs available. There are some, but it's a field very much in its infancy. I think we can say with confidence that clearly this is a massive social problem that affects many people.
Children, as adults, told me it was intervened too late. It should have been intervened by the authorities much earlier.
Sometimes some professionals make a mistake of confusing and conflating anxiety with trauma. So they think that it's going to be traumatic to separate the child from the alienating parent because the child appears so close to that parent.
It was disturbing, but it was not so traumatic. Then staying in the alienating atmosphere, we are happy that we were forced, but without help from outside, we couldn't have changed.
There may be some anxiety surrounding that separation, but you need that separation to allow the child to break that unhealthy bond.
Some of the programs are effective, especially when the court system and other social institutions really are behind the idea that children need both parents in their lives and that alienation is extremely harmful to children.
And there are interventions that are put in place to repair that relationship, to help the child develop critical thinking skills. And there's tremendous amount of misinformation on social media about this.
This is a field I'd really emphasize where specialized training is vital.
Otherwise, what you would have is that child goes to 1 or 2 hours of therapy, and maybe a couple of times a week, and the child goes back home in the same atmosphere of toxicity. Same sort of brainwashing, same disparagement continues, and that's absurd.
In many countries, there's still this idea that when parents can't get along, when they can't agree, one parent must have the primary care of children and the other, well, can be a visitor in the child's life at best. And in these cases, parental alienation flourishes.
Alienation cases are difficult to litigate. Sometimes there are false allegations of parental alienation, much like we see false allegations of domestic violence or false allegations of any nature.
The difficult parent who says all sorts of things about the other parent, about their lack of parenting skills or the unwillingness of the child.
And it's not easy because these cases have a lot of factual allegations. They have a lot of mental health issues.
There are some crazy claims made that courts are that these are abusive parents.
As an alienated parent should be able to turn to the state. In the majority of cases, that support doesn't come, and they get blamed for the situation they're in. Stigmatising 50% of the population by virtue of their gender. So if you're a man in Australia, you are deemed to be a perpetrator by virtue of your gender.
Child protection services generally shy away from these cases. If they hear it's a matter of a conflict between two spouses, they say, well, you have to solve this either at the family counseling offices or you have to go to court.
The children, as it seems with all the information available, should be treated as emergency cases. They should be dealt with promptly. It's completely wrong to have these cases running for years through legal proceedings and so on.
I'm very clear there has to be incentives to do the right thing for their children and consequences for not. And that's the big deficiency in family law systems around the world. They don't enforce their orders.
In these legal systems, they themselves are promoting alienation because they're pitting parents against each other in a legal battle where they need to disparage the other person as a parent.
$500,000 is what it costs a parent who's been falsely accused of family violence to recover their children, if they're lucky. You can do it, but only if you're wealthy.
There are things happening here in Norway that reminds me a lot of Costa Rica 30 years ago. How come two such different cultures spread apart so wide in time? Why do you see the same problem? What's behind it?
2 years ago, I asked the professionals, would you trust yourself, your own family problems, entrust the problems, your own problems, to the system you represent? And most of them said no.
So there's a social injustice and inequity there, that you've got alienated parents who themselves have been abused because they've been exposed to harmful behaviours, trying to rescue their children and finding the state is implicated in the actual alienation, and then they have to pay the kidnapper to release their children.
There is a certain acknowledgement of the concept of parental alienation.
The decisions from the court in Strasbourg, the European Court, is binding in a way for the national courts.
When I came to Norway and had this very rosy idea of Norway and loving Norway and gender equality.
There has been a lot of decision in European Court of Human Rights about child welfare cases in Norway.
So this Court of Appeal of Frankfurt disregarded anything said by the European Court of Human Rights, or even worse, they just ignore it.
The Supreme Court has not contributed to any improvement of facilitating contact.
They use the concept of parental alienation as a possible reason why the child, in this specific case, do not want to see the parent.
It is because the court sees this as a specific sort of issue and is a problem that needs to be addressed, and advising that this should be done with, experts.
The Supreme Court in Norway has never given so little contestation as now, after the European Court rulings.
Why is Germany opposing so fiercely against parental alienation, so damaging so many, I told you, 100,000 every year, and accepting that as collateral damage? For why? Which is the purpose behind?
Cases of parental alienation exists, and that those cases sometimes is a violation of the Article 8.
You should be careful in not overrating the importance of these judgments, because they come so late. They only award monetary compensation, which falls very short of actually compensating for the huge harm that may already have occurred.
Because of the passage of time, not very important, the passage of time, it's very difficult for the European Court to make it good again for the individual, but maybe it can make it better for other people in the future.
The children, as they were when the problem started, they are no longer children. They are grown-ups.
So we are actually still going in the wrong direction.
You could make the claim that it means nothing But in the general sort of, the presentation of the general principles and the importance of them, this is something you can only hope that will filter into the national systems and improve the situation.
Sometimes you need to show the dimension of parental alienation.
It's a global problem, not just a localized one to, for example, the UK and the US.
We should consider parental alienation as a societal problem, a big societal problem. You cannot say there are many other problems, events, negative events in society that affects 100,000 people every year in a society.
That's where we start to use the words like endemic. Something that is so prevalent within our society, so part of our processes of separation, that it's potentially something that we don't even question anymore, and that's a problem. Because these behaviours are damaging, they are a form of abuse, they have severe impact that demands some pretty urgent and pretty radical and pretty wide-sweeping action.
We have to start talking socioeconomics. What are the economic costs of suicide? What are the economic costs of ruptured family relationships? We know that alienated children, disproportionately draw on social resources and mental health, education elsewhere, they, for the rest of their lives possibly. We know that alienated parents are harmed by exposure to those behaviours.
But how do you define the best interest of the child? And is it the interest only of that child that is in conflict? What about the best interest for me as a boy, as a half sibling, having to grow up with a traumatized father?
Every time we say something bad about the father or the mother of our child, we hurt our child. We would not do it if we knew this.
I remember as well my feeling as a child of opening family albums and seeing these two other children, these two other boys who were older than me, and I was really longing for having big brothers. I didn't have that.
I went to my father and I said, why didn't you do more to keep the contact? And they had given him the advice, it's much worse for the child if you go to court.
My father being a highly competent and a highly loving father, but who had the emotional struggle because of that.
It's a big void.
It is not the child's job to heal the parents or the family or to look for siblings, but a lot of children take this on.
What can I do? How can I keep in touch even though my child don't want to be in touch?
No one thinks about the fact that, there's a large population of alienated parents who over time will become alienated grandparents.
It's important for parents to know that the first meeting is the first step in rebuilding the relationship. And so many parents are so focused on the first meeting that they don't develop the skills to rebuild the relationship.
These are grandparents who have never met their grandchildren, never seen their grandchildren, in many cases only learned by accident that they are grandparents.
I'm sure the next generation will be clearer because of more research in this issue.
Don't give up. Don't feel that you are rejected because the child don't know what's going on.
I do believe strongly that this is a much larger hidden population than anyone really would imagine.
The situation will slowly change.